Donald Trump says he's ready to impose new sanctions on Russia after last night's massive aerial attack on Ukraine, the largest since Moscow's full-scale invasion more than 3 years ago. Ukraine's military says its air defenses were overwhelmed by more than 800 drones, with government buildings in Kyiv being targeted for the very first time. President Zelensky called the attacks ruthless, and Sir Keir Starmer says they were a clear sign Russia wasn't serious about peace. And yet, the attack comes a little over 3 weeks since Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin held a much-touted summit meeting to try to broker a ceasefire. We'll have more on the waning diplomatic efforts to end the conflict in a moment, but first to Sarah Rainsford, who's live in Kyiv for us tonight. Sarah.
Well, yeah, Clive, it was another extremely difficult day for people here in Ukraine as Russia set yet another record for the number of drones and missiles launched from there at this country, sending people into air raid shelters, sheltering from the danger. This is becoming a pattern. These drones are fairly cheap for Russia to produce. They send them in huge waves of drones to try to overwhelm the air defenses. Many of the drones are actually decoys, even cheaper, even easier. But it's very, very difficult for Ukraine to defend this city. And for the first time this morning, the very tight defenses around the government district, just here behind me, right in the center of the Ukrainian capital, was penetrated by a Russian attack. I think that was pretty shocking for people, another twist in this war. And all of that happening, even as Donald Trump's attempts to push for peace are getting nowhere. People here in Ukraine becoming increasingly frustrated, many of them, in fact, increasingly angry that all the diplomacy is going nowhere, but Russia's attacks are continuing. This is how Kyiv was woken today, with the biggest aerial attack of the war so far. Russia is escalating its war here, not ending it. This is right in the city centre, the best protected space in the country. But Ukraine's air defences were overwhelmed. The cabinet office left burning. Within hours, though, the Prime Minister herself was back inside, touring the damage and calling on Ukraine's allies for more help to protect the skies, for more sanctions on Moscow. Because this is what another drone did today to a block of flats. This morning we found emergency teams still searching the wreckage, looking for bodies, trying to make the ruins safe. All around were those who survived and can still barely believe it. A young woman and her baby son were killed here. Artem filmed the fire moments after his family had escaped from the 5th floor.
This was the biggest number of drones yet. It's terrorism against civilians.
Yelena describes multiple blasts, one after another, and no time to seek shelter. There were more than 800 drones overnight across Ukraine. We're now seeing scenes like this more and more often because Russia is increasing its attacks on Ukraine. And that means that people here who are affected are not just upset and shocked, they're really angry. Because while Vladimir Putin tells Donald Trump he's ready for peace, to negotiate, on the ground in Ukraine, this is the reality. Families attacked in their homes and losing everything. So I asked Valentina what she thought about peace talks with Putin.
Trump tells us Putin's a good guy, but if he were, this war would never have started.
Valentina's flat was destroyed. She believes Russia wants to destroy her country. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, in his nightly address, President Zelensky said Vladimir Putin was testing the world by escalating his attacks on Ukraine and that the world must respond. This evening, Donald Trump said he's ready to increase sanctions on Moscow. Here's Joe Inwood.
Just hours after Russia launched its biggest aerial attack of the war, this question to President Trump.
Are you ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing Putin?
A suggestion that Donald Trump is finally going to make good on his threats to use economic pressure against Russia. It was a scenario he felt he could avoid when he met Vladimir Putin face to face in Alaska. But 3 weeks on, the man who once said he could solve the war in 24 hours told Republican lawmakers it's proven far harder than he expected.
The war that I thought was going to be the easiest is probably the most difficult. That's the Ukraine and Russia. I thought that would be easier, the relationship with President Putin, all of that. It didn't matter. It's ended up being probably the most difficult.
When he visited the White House, President Zelensky agreed to meet his Russian counterpart. Speaking on a trip to China, Vladimir Putin said he too would meet, but on one condition, that Volodymyr Zelensky came to Moscow. Today, that got this response.
He can come to Kiev. It's understandable that he is doing it to postpone the meeting. We said. I always said we can't trust Putin. He plays games, and he's playing games with the United States.
But despite peace seeming as far away as ever, plans for the day after continue. A coalition of the willing, led by France and the UK, is gaining some momentum. But it would only guarantee a peace, rather than bringing it about. And even there, questions remain.
What all European countries seeking to support and protect Ukraine face is the reality of the aftermath of decades of defense drawdowns in their own armed forces. So what these countries that have got together to try to support Ukraine may be swiftly realizing is that a coalition of the willing is something very different from a coalition of the able.
President Putin has ruled out any NATO forces as part of a settlement, saying they would be legitimate targets. As Kyiv once again burns, the question is, will further sanctions be enough to force Russia to come to the negotiating table? If they don't, Donald Trump's attempts to force peace could go up in smoke. Joe Inwood, BBC News.